Yeah. I actually just saw my cat throw up, so I'm gonna have to clean that up. I'm gonna be
Oh
right
yeah, please. My cats are
back.
going crazy here too, actually.
Yeah. So let me sort that out and then we'll get started. Sorry about
Yeah.
this. 1 second.
I'm recording already, but I'm not imagining that this part will be in the podcast, and then we can get into the actual conversation.
She literally threw up into a USB port.
Oh
I'm gonna have to take that thing apart and clean it up anyway.
my gosh, crazy.
It's totally normal. It's typical, but it's certainly not in a USB port. That's a new one. I'm gonna have to. It's actually
Like,
really gross. It's all caked in there. Anyway, I'll figure it out later.
oh, nasty. Sorry, you have to deal with that.
It's okay.
Welcome to the Clown Spirit Podcast. And here's your clowntastic host, Mr. Barnaby King.
You may be wondering why I decided to begin this episode with Jay's cat throwing up. If you want to find out, listen to the end of the episode and you will discover. I will just say, though, right now, that it was Jay's idea to keep that in. And that just goes to show what a playful, fun, interesting person he is. I'm talking, of course, about Jay Vidyarthi, my guest on this week's podcast episode. If you're new to the Clown Spirit podcast, welcome. I am Barnaby, your host, and the founder of Clown Spirit, where we take the power of clowning and we use it to bring lightness, joy, and connection to your life and the lives of everybody around you. The intention of this podcast is to bring new light to clowning and the light of clowning to new areas of life. And that's why I interview interesting people like Jay Vidyarthi, who is a meditator and tech lover, an accomplished designer, entrepreneur, and thought leader at the intersection of mindfulness and technology. He's the founder of Still Ape, and as the founder of Still Ape, has helped millions of people improve their well-being. He is also the writer of Reclaim Your Mind, 7 Strategies to Enjoy Tech Mindfully, which has just come out in the last couple of days, right when this podcast episode is being published. I read the book and it is really fascinating. It's a really great read, and I took a lot of great advice and lessons from it about setting boundaries around my own use of technology and my kids. Really worth reading. So you may be wondering, what does Jay have to say or do about clowning? Again, listen on and you'll find out. I really hope you enjoy this quite fascinating and fun episode of the Clown Spirit Podcast with Mr. Jay Vidyarthi. So, Jay Vidyarthi, thank you so much for being on the Clown Spirit Podcast. It's really a delight to meet you.
I'm excited. This is gonna be fun.
Your book is so timely. I'm a parent of 2 girls, age 11 and 13, and managing their use of technology is a constant struggle. And of course, managing my own use of technology. And this is the challenge that we all face in this moment. And it's very refreshing to read your book, which has makes a lot of sense to me and really brings together these 2 worlds of mindfulness, meditation, I suppose consciousness, and the world of tech. That's really putting it in a nutshell. There's so much richness there. I wonder if you could just take us through, for the reader or for the listener who might not have read the book yet, although we will, of course, put all details in the show notes so that people can go out and buy it. Could you take us through the key points, the key pillars, if you like, of the book itself?
Yeah, the high level is that, as you said, this is a really timely topic on people's minds. At the same time, there's a lot of different messages about it. We live in a time where, first of all, the technologists are ready to accelerate to the singularity and completely give all of our everything to AI, basically, and just move 100% in that direction without regret and some vague idea that all of our problems will be solved and we'll never have to work again. And then you also have the growing movement of those who might be a little more wary in the mindfulness space, in the wellness space. There's this term of digital wellness that's emerged where people are almost anti-tech, right? They're reaching a point where like technology is bad and oh, it's just gross seeing everyone walking on the street looking at their phone and these kids are sucked into their video games and doom scrolling and blah blah blah. And it's very negative and shaming.
Mm.
And basically, the reason I wrote the book, and the book tries to be between those extremes, which is to acknowledge that there's some merit to both those positions, but also neither extreme really captures the full picture. And it does so in a way that's practical for everyday life. As someone who loves video games, but also loves to go on silent meditation retreats, I've been forced to confront this in my life because every time I try to say, listen, technology is bad and I'm going to become a total mindful person, it feels like something I really love and cherish and play with and enjoy is missing. But then if I go fully into technology, then I'm all fidgety and addicted to my phones and compulsive and get stuck in loops of overuse. And so I've been forced with these dual passions to figure out how to navigate them in my life. And the book captures 7 strategies that I've taken out of that, which are more generalizable to everyone.
Yeah, and we often use the language of addiction to talk about technology, and you make a really good point in the book that maybe that's not appropriate, and that you start to use instead the language of relationship. And I think that's a really interesting move. And maybe we could talk a little bit about that. You're really framing technology as this entity that we need to develop a healthy, positive relationship with appropriate boundaries, and that the same kinds of problems might come up in that relationship that come up in human relationships.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I'm cognizant just like a minute ago, I used the word addiction. And I think it's important that we're clear about what we mean by that, which is that there's a very small subset of people who I think we could accurately characterize as addicted to technology. And they are like the vast minority, right? These are people where the negative impact that technology is having on their life is actually somewhat akin to someone who's like smoking cigarettes in the casino, gambling all day, like their life savings, or someone who's using heroin to the point that their entire life is falling apart. That's a pretty rare element. Now, some people are quick to point out, oh, dopamine's involved and there are withdrawal symptoms. And while that's true, there are elements that might be related to addiction. I think most addiction scientists would make a categorical difference. My point in the book is for most of us, we want to actually have practical tools to improve our relationship with these. And the framing of a relationship actually fits the bill a lot better. It has for me and it has for a lot of the people I've worked with, where yes, we have to have boundaries in our relationships, but there's also things about our relationship that we love and enjoy, and we should enjoy our time within our relationships as well. Also, if you're setting a boundary on a stranger approaching you in the street, you set a firm boundary. Don't talk to me, go away from me. I don't want to ever see you again. That's like the boundary, right? But when you have a friend that you need to set boundaries with, it's a lot more nuanced because you have a relationship with this person, you like this person, there's things they bring to your life, there's things you bring to their lives. So boundaries are more finicky because you have to be like, okay, I have to draw boundaries here and there, but we don't want to sacrifice and lose the relationship. In fact, a skillful boundary would make the relationship stronger. And I think for most of us, that's the approach we want to take with technology. That in fact, technology is ubiquitous. There's so much joy, so much productivity, so much relaxation that we can get from it. But if we don't have healthy boundaries and positive rituals around it, we can end up losing the plot, not only having negative impacts, but also losing the things we love about technology. And that's why the word reclaim is in the title, because not only are you reclaiming your mind, you're reclaiming your technology too. It's like almost as a tech lover, I'm almost saddened that most people's interactions with technology are so negative because it's totally possible to have incredibly great, joyful, fun, playful, connective interactions with our technology. And we don't want to lose that either.
It's really interesting. We're going to come on to the strategies themselves in just a moment because they're really cool. But I think Following this relationship idea, and you just mentioned the word shame, and these kind of negative experiences and emotions that come up around technology are also resonant for me anyway of some real life relationships. Like there are relationships where we become codependent, where we become emotionally almost seeking to heal something in us from the other person, right? Hoping that somehow their approval, their love, that will heal us. And I think that's very familiar and recognizable to most of us in relationships. And it's very much the same thing with technology, right? I am constantly, I think, looking to something out there in this tech world to fill a void. And that's when
Yeah.
when I feel that sensation, it's when I realize, oh, I have a problem. This is a problematic relationship that I need to address.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the strategies in the book is about addressing the underlying emotional needs that we guides our problematic use of technology. And I think that's right. There are things we are looking for from technology that technology feels like it could provide, but it can't really. And then there's other things that we are struggling with that we also blame technology for. And that's also a parallel that shows up in our human relationships, where if you take a hypothetical, and by hypothetical, I mean my marriage, if you take a hypothetical relationship, there are situations where I am demanding things from my partner that it's unfair of me to be demanding from her. Like maybe I'm lacking social contact and I really want her to engage with me, but she needs some space right now. And then I switch to a blame mode where I'm like, you're never there to connect with me. And none of that is fair. And then you imagine that in a technology reaction. Now, don't get me wrong, technology needs to be better, it needs to be ethical. There are areas where it needs to be regulated. We need to investigate the impacts on mental health. Absolutely. But in our daily lives, I don't know how productive it is to be chasing illusions to try to fulfill our deepest emotional needs. Like we want to feel popular and connected, and we want sexual gratification, and we want reputation and career, and we want it all from this little device. And then to start blaming technology that we're not getting those things, like it's just not a way forward for an individual who's trying to get security in their relationship with technology to feel mindful and balanced, where they can both avoid the traps, but also enjoy the things they enjoy. Like you should be able to watch a show on a streaming service and just enjoy it and not feel guilty because TV is somehow bad. But you also should be able to set boundaries around the interruptions that are distracting you from like playing with your kids. It's a tricky balance. That's why we need a whole book about it, because I've been working on this for 10 plus years and it's not simple, but I
Mm.
really do believe it's a necessary skill for my son and for all of us as the world changes.
I really liked a couple of times you described a healthy interaction with technology where you would say to somebody that you're with, excuse me, sorry, I just have to go and send a text message or an email, and you'd have to get up and go into another room or go to a different part of the room and do that interaction with the technology and then come back. Too often we find the phone is either in the pocket or it's right next to us, and we hear every buzz, everything, or even without that, we're just checking it. And this brings me to this idea of the attention economy, which is the base of your book, I think. And I wonder if you could just briefly talk to that. What is the attention economy? How are people in very subtle ways fighting and competing for our attention? And why is it problematic that when we give that too much, too readily?
Yeah, I think 100, 150 years ago at the dawn of marketing, and even before that, when someone puts up a shingle and says, I'm selling my wares, or puts a ad in a 1920s newspaper saying, hey, you can reach out to me for this service, that was advertising at its dawn, and it didn't seem too problematic then. But things are different now, right? When you get a message from an advertiser, whether that's a political party or a corporation or even like when you get a message, especially if it's from a large organization with a big budget, you're getting just like one message, which is part of an almost militaristic campaign to trigger your desires, insecurities, and fears and influence your behavior. these simple words like advertising and marketing don't really feel appropriate anymore. We're getting into the territory of
Yeah.
propaganda or Inception or like the movie, right? Like it's pretty extreme. Now, when you multiply that by the technology where these messages are embedded into the devices that we keep beside our bed and the screens in the pub and everywhere, and also that those messages are targeted. They're building a profile of who you are and trying to find the message that you're most likely to click on. You're basically in an economy that is profiting off attention. So basically, what we're living in now is an attention economy, which is a world where large organizations are aggressively competing and spending lots of money to harness your attention at scale. And as a mindfulness practitioner, first of all, I know that my well-being is directly tied to the quality of my attention. So that's a problem right away. Second of all, I know that the more that these messages are put in my head, the less authentically I can show up because I'm getting more and more spin from podcasts and clips and social media and news headlines that it's very difficult to have a kind of authentic inner voice. And so ultimately, this problem, it's a layered problem. There's the problem of the economics, and there's a problem on a government and economy level. There's the problem of the technologies. There's the problem of the advertisers. But the part that I really want to stress is when people talk about this, they often talk like the individual is powerless. And that's where mindfulness comes in, because that's not true. The substrate of this is attention. And it's happening in the mundane moments of your everyday life, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, while you're commuting, in your car, at work. And these are areas where, as a mindfulness practitioner, I can tell you there are skills you can develop to manage your attention. And to me, that's almost a necessity now. Like maybe 2000 years ago, we were trying to get some space from our thoughts and find well-being. Now, practicing mindfulness is about sovereignty. It's about finding your authentic freedom of attention, your right to pay attention to what you deem relevant in your life in a world where everything is trying to pull it in different directions. So we refer to this as the attention economy, and I refer to that activist stance as attention activism, which is what I would call the new role that mindfulness has to play in our lives in the 21st century.
Oh, I love it. Attention activism. That's very cool. Yeah. So the underlying message of the book, it's called Reclaim Your Mind. I would say mindfulness, the idea of mindfulness and the kinds of practices of awareness and meditation and so on that go with that are the sort of the common theme of what you're saying is the sort of antidote to this overdependence or problematic relationship with technology. But then you have these 7 specific strategies that each have a chapter in the book, and they're all fascinating, and we could go into each in depth. But I'm wondering if we had to pick a couple or 3 to give little snippets to the listeners, which ones do you want to focus in on?
I feel like one that we already started to touch on would be the second strategy in the book, which is to see through conceptual illusions. So I don't know. Why do you want to go? How about we go there?
I love that one, actually. Yeah. So this is about how our lives or how technology creates this illusion of simplicity where life is complex and messy in reality. And
Yeah.
there's this sort of seductive idea that technology gives us that things can be very simple, right? So you get a like on a Facebook post and it's, somebody likes me. And that just doesn't reflect like the reality of human relationships and the messiness of
Right.
that.
At all. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think even in that example right there, it's like a metaphor, right? And it's an illusion. So what does a like actually mean, right? In our head, we're like, it feels good. You see your post got 10 likes. There's no denying that feels good. And that's great. It's great to feel good. There's nothing wrong with feeling good. But what kind of joy are we experiencing from that? If it's like, oh, that's a fun little tickle, this is fun. That feels reasonably secure and healthy to me. And that's what I try to practice. I don't try to pretend that those things are not valuable to me. They are. I like it, especially if I'm out here promoting a book. Someone likes the post about the book. It feels great. I don't feel shame about that. That's like step one. But then let's actually look at what's happening. The reality is someone maybe scrolled by the post. They maybe read the first 3 or 4 words. They saw the picture, they clicked it, and they kept scrolling. if you are looking at those 10 likes as your unique source of connection and social validation, the system is translating a total of a couple of people swiping by and barely registering that you exist into an illusion that everyone is reading your post in detail and looking at you and really loves what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, first of all, that's a lie. It's an illusion. But second of all, over time, as we've all experienced, you start to feel a little bit empty, like you're not getting that social connection. And so someone who's got a kind of varied diet of social connection in their lives and just gets a little tickle from 10 likes, that seems totally fine to me. But I think more and more we see people where like this becomes their main source of social connection. They start aggressively changing who they are and posting in certain ways because, oh, if you say this at the beginning, then your post will get more likes, in this like deep craving for the emotional need at the heart of this is a deep feeling of being loved and being connected.
Mm.
And this technology will never provide that. So you get caught in this endless treadmill of chasing more and more likes with no possibility that it will ever give you the deep sense of being accepted and loved that you're really searching for. So in that latter example, we have a problem. In the former example, likes are great. Let's enjoy them. That's where we have to be practicing a lot of self-awareness to know which things are joyful for us and which ones are problematic for us. Because one person might be having a great time on social media, and it would be completely absurd to take it out of their lives because they're having a good time. They're building their business and they're having a little tickle now and then and finding some joy, and it's fine. Whereas someone else might be getting into that problematic loop. And the same thing could be said about video games. It could be said about work email. It could be said about any technology that we use. What is the underlying emotional need? And is that causing a problematic behavior pattern, or is this actually a source of positivity in your life?
Mm. Yeah, this is great. It's funny that you chose this section because I think it was the one that triggered me the most. There's some great sentences that in this section. One I'm just finding here. You can look at any technology used in your life and ask the same questions. What uncomfortable feeling is this helping me avoid? What emotional need is it putting a band-aid on? And then with awareness, we may find ourselves stuck on specific conceptual illusions that are helping us escape discomfort and placate emotional needs. So this kind of starts to cross over into some clown territory for me because it's to do with that clowning is really about facing those discomforts in life. It's facing, fundamentally for me, it's about facing the flaws and the things that we want to shove underneath the carpet and ignore. And clowns pull those out for us to see and play with them and make and confront the shame, confront the discomfort. So there's a kind of mindfulness, like in mindfulness or in meditation, we don't want to try to cover anything up or try not to have thoughts or difficult feelings. We just want to bring everything out into the light so we can actually see it more clearly and then be able to act more consciously.
Yeah, when I started learning a little bit about clowning in recent workshops, and this is a new thing for me, but it's been really unlocking and inspiring because I have done a lot of that mindfulness training and have confronted discomfort directly. And I really do think if I had 2 seconds to try to share with someone what the secret to being a happy person would be, I would say learn to be friends with discomfort. That's what I would say. That's the secret. I
Yeah.
think that's the grounding point. That's so much else here, but I think that's the grounding point that really helps. And I did actually experience that in two ways as I started to dip my toes into what it's like to embrace the inner clown. One is, first of all, the historical perspective. I thought before I took any education in this or any training, I thought of a clown as most people do, just a birthday clown or Ronald McDonald or just someone with makeup. And I didn't have that. But I also love reading sci-fi and fantasy, specifically historical fiction and fantasy is like one big fiction interest of mine. And that really gave me some lens on, wait a minute, as I started to learn about the archetype of the clown and like the sacred clown and the jester and the fool, I started to recognize, oh, there was actually like a role for the clown to play historically. And that role was specifically about the perfect archetype for it to me is like, even in Shakespeare, you've got the king and the king has the fool. And the fool acts silly, but also has this divine role of speaking truth to power. Like The role is to say things as they are. Like everyone will be all pomp and circumstance. So that's a lovely gown, Lady Macbeth. But the fool is the one who can be like, that's an ugly gown and not be kicked out of the court, right? And there's something about the fool's role in helping everyone confront discomfort there. The second thing was in my own experience trying to embody these elements, there was something about confronting shame specifically. When I was a kid, I would just roll around. I have a 5-year-old, he's about to turn 6, and he doesn't have any shame. He just rolls around, does whatever he wants, and has fun. He makes every situation as fun as it can be, even to the chagrin of all the grown-ups around him. Like he's just trying to make everything fun. And we lose that at some point for good reason, but we lose it entirely, and there isn't really a good reason for that. There's parts where we have to be serious, but we lose it entirely. And that was the other thing that opened for me. I felt like as I learned the skills of clowning, there was a clown archetype in me that I would equate to my inner child. And he's a little bit mischievous and he likes to play jokes and he likes to shit talk. And these are things that there isn't like a lot of room for me in my life. Like I noticed my like I have a group of friends from school and we all shit talk with each other and none of us are really allowed to shit talk anywhere else. And so that's a place where we can let that out. And then the mischievous silliness that I can unlock with my partner a little bit has also been a little bit unlocked there. And I'd also unlocked stuff with my kid. But there was something about that which was confronting the shame of being an adult and being like, I can be childish. I don't have to be smart and serious and well put together all the time. There's sometimes I can roll around and make a dumb joke that no one laughs at and then pretend to be embarrassed about it. And there's room for that. And that's, I think, healing, right?
Please forgive this intrusion into the podcast interview. I'd like just to take a moment of your time to let you know about a wonderful community, an ensemble of clowns, an assemblage of idiots who go by the name of Clown Spirit Village. This is a space in which you are able to nurture your own clown, your clown spirit, your clown energy. Find that encouragement and support and space for you to grow and expand and discover what it is that you uniquely bring to the world through your Clown Spirit Village. Consists of many aspects. The one I want to talk about right now is the coaching sessions. These are absolutely wonderful, inspiring meetings that we have a couple of times a week, and as a member you can come to however many or however few you want to, whatever works for you. Sometimes we share bits of clown work that are in progress and we get feedback on them. Sometimes we bring a vague idea, an intention, a desire, something we want to do in the future, and we can bring it up in the group and get feedback on it. Sometimes there's a clown-related question we have, something we just want to discuss, and the whole group pitches in with their thoughts and ideas, and it becomes a kind of roving discussion around clown themes. Sometimes it's just a space in which we can share what's going on with us at the moment in this wonderful, supportive, positive, encouraging community. Every single session is unique and surprising in some way. Clown Spirit Village also includes masterclasses, access to online courses, resources, a clown directory and WhatsApp group to keep in touch and to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the clown world. And we're adding more and more things to this Clown Spirit Village space all the time. I would really love to invite you to come and hang out with us. Just try it for a month. I always am true to my money back guarantee. So if you come in for a month and it's not for you and it didn't provide what you wanted, I will gladly return that month's subscription. You can leave, cancel whenever you want, come back whenever you want. There are 3 different tiers which all provide exactly the same service, but they're at different prices according to your circumstances. We want to make clowning as accessible to as many people as possible, and we're doing our best to be true to that commitment. Come and play, come and be part of the Clown Spirit Village. And now, back to the podcast episode. There was a section in the book where you early on where you're talking about your own sort of childhood and early life and how much you enjoyed being the center of attention and how that then translated into this need for the same attention from technology. And you mentioned a couple of times that you would love literally performing and being in front of people, being capturing people's attention, being a little bit outrageous. So it almost sounds like you have a little bit of a trickster clown persona there. Do you still Are you still able to satisfy that? Do you perform and present publicly, or or is it, are you channeling that through things like this book? Because it seems like you are speaking truth. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to speak truth in sometimes a slightly confrontational way.
I would say that it's a really good question, first of all, and thank you for asking it. Like it's helping me work through it just to even think about how to answer it. I would say that it's yes and no. I would say I do have a lot of that performance and center of attention needs satisfied in my work, with my book, with my company, like the kind of work we do, but not really in an embodied way. And I feel like I'm struggling with that in my body. I think it's difficult for me to find ways like having a son actually really helped a lot. Like having a kid, like we get to do it a little bit, but he's already getting a little older and like less interested in me and more interested in the world around him. And that's only going to continue like it should. Like I play music as a kind, I still play music every day. I used to
Mm,
perform, but I don't really have an outlet to perform in. And I do often wrestle with that. I do think about, should I be putting something online? What should I do? Should I go to the local place and try to play an open mic and find a place for it? So it's an ongoing journey. But yeah, like you said, it's a perfect example of this was something that was healthy for me as a kid. I remember being lauded for being doing pretty good in the high school stage performance and people being like, great, when it's you're trying to be the center of attention and you're succeeding at it. Whereas now, not only do you not get that satisfaction on social media, it's also there's this weird like doubt and shame hang up. Like I'm promoting this book and it's tricky for me to imagine just like putting myself out there and being like, hey, everybody, I've got a book coming out. Like, even being on podcasts like this, it's like there's a weird hang up of wanting to share and wanting people to pay attention to it and to me versus feeling a little bit ashamed about that. Like, there's something wrong with wanting to
mm,
be the center of attention. And I think that's one of the things technology has actually twisted for us because, again, you think hundreds of years ago, someone goes out and brings out their instrument and performs, there isn't a whole media empire around it. Whereas I've definitely felt this as a musician. Like, first of all, as a teenager, there was all these illusions of rock stardom that were coming to me through technology and distorting my perception of what it meant to be a successful musician. Whereas now I consider myself a successful musician just because I still play every day and I enjoy it. And
mm,
that took me years to get that because for a long time, I felt like a failure because I wasn't getting any attention for my music. But the second part of it is like I have noticed that like people won't take you seriously as a musician unless you tell them that you have a certain amount of subscribers or likes or you've sold albums or something. And there's a difference between being like a media personality or recognized famous musician or clown or author or scientist or founder versus finding joy in it and finding balance in it and enjoying your practice and your craft. Those are both forms of success that I think we should take seriously. And I think publicly, because of our media environment, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to take someone seriously as a musician if they don't have some big name associated with them. And so there is a lot of complexity around that, I think, and I'm still working through it.
yeah, that's really insightful. And there's something about there's something vulnerable, and this brings me back to clowning as well, about putting out a book or anything into the world and not knowing how it's going to be received and what impact is it going to have, how people are going to see me. In clowning, we one of the fundamental exercises is just stepping out on stage on your own with a red nose, so you already look ridiculous. Although you don't really need a red nose to look ridiculous. We all,
We already look ridiculous.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the things I would say. We're already idiots. We don't need to try very hard um,
Yeah.
to become an idiot. We just are naturally. And in clowning, we're just letting that, you have to be okay with the risk of being seen fully for who you are. And that's super scary. Nobody really wants the world to see who we really are. And of course, in social media, we can do a lot of curating and manicuring of like our identity so that we come across in a certain kind of way. And what clowning does, for me anyway, is it's about stripping back those all those layers and masks and pretense, all the pretense, and just getting as close as possible, if it is really possible, to some deeper form of human connection. It is almost like mindfulness is for oneself, and clowning is for like relationship. It's like being mindful and being open and vulnerable and naked in connection with other humans. And I want
Yeah, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I think that's exactly right. And it's so alive for me right now because I really am doing exactly what you said. Like I'm launching this book and I've gone through all kinds of emotions and even those echoes of those days as a young musician, trying to put myself out there and all the challenges and lessons learned, both in the way that like I learned so much about what it means to put yourself out there that has honestly, I am not exaggerating when I say made this book possible. I do not think I could have written this book if I hadn't learned what I'd learned about the illusions of success and the vulnerability required and how to respond to people's reactions to your vulnerability that I learned when I was trying to make it as a musician. Absolutely. But then also the like echoes of pain, right? Of those feelings of playing that empty room and no one showing up, which I did many times. And like recognizing that in myself and saying, oh, there's a part of me in here that's like afraid that no one cares about this book. And that part of me is leading me to make kind of questionable decisions. Oh, should I like all of a sudden start using TikTok, which I never use, which is, but I'm like, maybe that's how I'm going to get people to pay attention to me or something. And then having to notice this reaction, then say, okay, I definitely shouldn't just go all in on TikTok all of a sudden, but maybe there is something there. Maybe I should do something, or maybe I shouldn't. But trying to harness those painful reactions into seeing with clarity, which is another hallmark of mindfulness, like seeing things as they really are. And I think 10, 15 years ago, I could get caught in a loop like this and just think it's real. Whereas now I can talk with you about it the way we're talking about it with that level of meta awareness of saying, oh, I am noticing these like wounds from being ignored as a musician presenting themselves as I ramp up to launching my book. And now I can actually see them and therefore I can manage them. And it's been a healing process. I was actually just talking with a friend yesterday and she asked me like how I'm feeling about the book launch. And I actually like just the way she asked the question in the moment, I was like, I'm actually already satisfied. Like the book is just about to come out, but I'm actually already satisfied. I think by the time this goes live, it'll be out already, but like we're recording it just before. And I'm like, it actually doesn't really matter what happens now because of the amount of creative expression and performance and healing and even just like having conversations like we're having now that has resulted for me deciding to just pour my heart out on this page and also my learnings and try to do something helpful. It's already felt like it's been worth it. And I think that's some of the lesson when I tie it back to that clown performance. There was this one exercise, I can't remember what it was called. It was something like clown entrance or something. And you just had to go off stage and you just had to enter in a fun way and then leave. And that's it. And I actually play this with my 5-year-old because I was so inspired by this activity. It's so much fun. And there's something about that's so unbelievably deep. Like it's such a simple exercise,
Mm.
but it's so unbelievably deep because you explore identity. And there was one moment where I just came out as myself, did nothing, and walked back. And I heard this big response from the crowd, which was so confusing to me. But as I reflected on it, there's something brave about doing nothing. There's something brave about putting yourself in other people's view. And it's actually easy to come out and try to do a lot. And
Mm.
it's harder to do a little. And I feel that right now with my book and with music and everything. It's like actually quite hard for me to manage a joyful relationship with my musical instruments where I just play for no one but myself. That's actually hard. To do that in a joyful way is hard. To do it in a lonely, sad way, I wish I was out there. is a pattern that I've been stuck in, and that's easier. But to actually truly pick up those instruments, make a song, delete it, and smile on my way out the door is wild. It's hard and it's very satisfying.
That's cool. I like that. It's this idea of art as this fleeting thing that's just in the moment, and it doesn't matter who gets to see it or what impact it has.
Well, it does matter. I think it does matter, but it's a question about what you're trying to do, right? I think in this example where I'm at right now, which may change, but I'm in a stage now where I'm busy. I've got a son, I've got work, I've got this book. Music is a place for me to reconnect with myself and to break the patterns and be silly and explore and enjoy. And it's also sensory. It's like those sounds activate my body. And playing the
Mm.
drums, like I have an acoustic drum kit and it just feels amazing to play drums. That's what music is doing. But this book, for example, the goal is actually, I have a list of goals. Goal number one is have fun. Goal number two is anyone who reads it, whether it's 5 or 500 or 5,000, it actually helps them in their life. That's goal number two. And goal number three is hopefully maybe break even on my expenses. You know what I mean? And one of the things that's interesting about that is like when I was writing it, having that goal number two actually help people helped me do things like I set a maxim when writing the book. I don't know if you've noticed this. You can tell me if you noticed this or not. But when I was writing the book, I set a rule for myself that the book, this was before I'd even started writing. All I'd written was the sample chapter. I set a rule for myself that the book should have no statistics in it. I was just, I don't want this to try to appeal to some higher power, whether that's God or science or
Yeah.
population statistics. I want this to be about life. And those things are irrelevant, but it was a challenge for me because I have a background with like academic publication.
Mm.
But it was like, because the goal was for be helpful, like that usually doesn't help me when I'm reading a nonfiction book. I'm like, okay, 37% of people are dealing with mental health problems. Like, I get it. Either I am or I'm not. Like, what can you do to help me in my life? That was one of my goals. It is, if you have a different goal with music, then that's fine. But for me, that's the role it's playing right now. And I think to tie this up back to technology, it's like the social media example we gave. Like, if
Mm.
you've got a certain goal with social media and you're finding a little bit of joy in those 10 likes, that's different from someone whose goal is love and connection. And they're going through loops and banging their head against the wall to craft the perfect post to get 100 likes. That's a totally different thing. And
Yeah.
that's where it's never going to be simple. And we need the self-awareness to navigate this properly.
I really enjoy this focus on joy and pleasure, right? Joy and fun, pleasure as impulses to get in touch with, instincts to get in touch with. Oh, that gives me pleasure, that gives me joy. And so why not? If there is that quality to it. And I really like how you are navigating this kind of middle path between extreme responses of rejection or complete surrender. We don't have to make those extreme choices. There's this kind of middle path where if something gives you joy, if it's fun, then why not do it? As long as it's done, as long as that spirit, clown spirit, which is my goal, is still there while you're doing it and after you've done it. And you're not
Yeah.
just continuing to do it because it's become a reflex habit or because it's feeding some other emotional need.
Yeah, when I think about the clown spirit, I was actually reflecting on that this morning because I knew I was coming on. And the word that came to mind to me from my limited experience is fearless, right? And I think that's actually a very important word for our tech conversation because a lot of things that are coming out, like Jonathan Haidt had this book last year, The Anxious Generation, and it points out some of the mental health issues of technology with kids. These issues are real and we should not be ignoring them. There's another book called Unlocked by Pete Etchells, which basically points out some of the challenges with the methodology and that we shouldn't be certain yet about the problems with technology. There's still a lot of work to be done, but there are definitely problems. We feel them in our whole lives. Whether we ban them in schools or not is a whole different political issue. But I think from the clown spirit, fearless perspective, I think in our everyday life, we have the ability to manage our relationship with technology. It takes awareness, it takes effort, This is the cost of admission in modern life. Like we are here in the 21st century, this tech is here, but everything becomes harder if you're being dragged down by fear. And I equate that with the shame and the blame we talked about before and the guilt. Like there's just all this fear around it. Is this technology like destroying my children's lives? And is it destroying my life? And oh, if only I could just get outside. And that's in Buddhism, they talk about the second arrow, where it's, I don't know if you know that parable. Do you know that one?
No.
Yeah, I don't identify as a Buddhist, but I think of the Buddha as a really wonderful philosopher, the probably one of the best of all time when it comes to the human mind. And he has this metaphor of what we do often is we get hit by an arrow, and our reaction to it is to take another arrow and stick it in the wound,
Oh, yeah.
like the
Yeah.
second arrow. And the
Yeah.
idea being like, hey, we've got some problems with our technology, but then there's so many of us that are like making the problem worse by just stoking a ton of fear about it. It's like part of that addiction frame. Sure, I watched too many TV shows today. I'm not like dying in an alleyway with needles sticking out of my arm. Like we need to be realistic about what the scale of the problems are, and we need to make skillful actions in our own life, and we need to empower individuals just as much as we're getting our scientists to study and clarify the picture, talking to regulators about bans that may or may not be needed, and again, having our tech companies be more ethical in their design decisions. We as individuals have a role to play too.
There was something that came up for me, which I think you just alluded to a little. There was an example of a game that you spoke of in the book, which was called Journey, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated to check this out because it sounds like it's very different from your average game. It's just this kind of empty space that you just get to wander around in, and it's very beautiful and atmospheric. And it made me think about where we can bring actual creativity, or in my case, clown spirit or clown energy, into relationship with technology. And so for me, this is very apropos because I run an organization which is called Clown Spirit, and it's all online. What we identify as sort of brand is clowning online. This is where you can access a lot of clown related resources, trainings, and so on, but it's all via this medium, which has a kind of controversial and contradictory quality to it because people often think of clowning as this embodied medium, right? We have to be present with one another, and that's almost the essence of what it is. And yet I found that it is possible to have these very meaningful connected relationships through Zoom or other virtual online media. And those relationships can, and that clowning can, the sort of quality of clowning can transmit in different ways. So even just the simple, coming back to the idea of entrances, we can play in the real world with entrances by appearing around a door and having fun and playing with space. On this medium, we can play with the frame. The frame becomes a very enjoyable, fun restriction or limitation that prompts the breaking of rules or the stretching of rules and the challenging of convention. We can transgress by going down here, and like people who are listening can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just like disappearing below the frame, and I can just let the top of my head appear, and then I can let my eyes appear, and already
Yeah.
it's fun. I'm having fun, and I'm subverting the way a thing is supposed to be used or the way it was designed to be. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that because I'm looking for more and more ways that we can clown the technology.
Yeah, this is where the internet began, right? I was there for the dawn of the internet and playing the games, and we all had pseudonyms, and we're basically just saying random shit and making jokes, right? And memes are an example of clowning online, right? And what you said there, like that phrase, like the way things are supposed to be, the way they're designed to be, as a designer professionally, it's deeper than they are designed to be this way. There was a moment when social platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn in particular were the first ones that were like, you need to put your actual face and real name on this. Because up until then, my nickname as a teenager was like Arcana, and I would play games and I would go on chat rooms and no one knew who I was and I would just say shit. But there's still people who do that online, and now they're called trolls, and they get a bad rap because there's a lot of trolls that are really hateful. But we are in this false dichotomy where it's either you're a hateful troll or you're like a serious, upstanding, my name is Jay Vidyarthi and this is my LinkedIn profile. But I think there is an element of positive clowning that, like, maybe the clown is the opposite of the troll in this case, where I want to see the Clown Spirit organization go on LinkedIn and post a poop emoji, right? Just this is a platform where everyone is trying to be as serious as possible. And there are certain values to that. For example, I'm launching a book, and there's certain elements that are required, certain things that are designed in our systems of society and our social media of what that looks like and what you're supposed to do. But I like what you said about stretching the boundaries because there are certain things I'm not going to do. Like the publisher was talking a little bit about, like, I don't know, I'll save you the details, but just like coming across really pro and on all the social media channels. And I was like, I'm just going to keep being myself online the way I always have. Like, I'm not exactly posting poop emojis, but like, if you look at my newsletter, I just write, I don't have, here are my blog posts from last week, and here's the upcoming one, and here are the announcements. But I have to do that a little bit on the book world, right? But I think there's something about rekindling that original idea of the internet that is truly a clown spirit that was at the heart of it for a while. And I think people are wanting that back. And there is a small subset of people that I'm in community with on X/Twitter. And we just clown around. And that's my platform to just post whatever and see what happens. And yeah, I think more of us could do that. And maybe the prompt is for anyone who's listening and for you, when we're posting something online, to just take a moment to be like, what identity am I posting with here? What am I trying to come across as? And seeing if you want to subvert that a little. And I think it might be a kind of fun exercise. In fact, I want to do it after this call. So maybe
Yeah.
I'll explore it a little bit myself. But I get a little nauseous at some of the way that I'm supposed to come across in some of my professional
Yeah.
capacities. And
Yeah.
there's a little mischievous, like you said, my inner clown that wants to subvert it. And I can tell you a really funny story about that, which is I first noticed this coyote energy in myself when I was in that high school play, because the high school performance went to the next level and we were going to this big drama festival and everyone was so serious, like, we're going to do drama and blah 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 blah. And I was a secondary role or something, and I was just like in this like fun trip or whatever. And there was a moment where I was standing off stage, like waiting a few minutes for my cue, and I'm all in costume and I'm supposed to come out and do like some dancing or something. And I remember being overcome with this feeling of wanting to ruin the play. Like I wanted to run out and just say something. And I didn't do it, thankfully, but that was like my earliest memory of this coyote energy of mischievousness. That is the same part of me that gets nauseous when someone goes on LinkedIn and is, I'm just pleased to announce that I've been promoted yet again to the role of senior assistant district manager. And everyone's like, congratulations. Oh, you've done so great. And I'm like, I'm not trying to shit on that. That's great. And we should celebrate people, whatever. But there's a part of me that's just always finds that a little cringe. And it's the coyote energy. And I think there's room for that online as much as there's room for seriousness and other energies too.
Yeah. You are a sacred fool. I thought so. I had this suspicion.
I didn't realize it until I did that clowning workshop, but I get it. I understand it.
The idea of avatars and constructed identities as a playful way to put yourself out in the world is really interesting because I think that sometimes that can be more real than when you try to be yourself or you just like, hey, this is me. And this is also something that we see in clowning where the red nose and sometimes masks actually, instead of covering us up, they allow us to reveal more. Maybe one way of seeing it is that because we become like a metaphor almost of ourselves, we're speaking in a more poetic language, which gets to a deeper essence of truth of what it is to be human. When we use those kinds of, I don't know, tools or instruments, that's not quite the right word. But equally, I think that it gives us, it allows us to be fearless when you have a little bit of playfulness. Instead of just, oh, here I am, here's me, I'm naked. If you put on a wonderful wig or a costume or a hat, it allows you to go to be like, oh, I've got this little protection on me now. I can really step out and be authentic. I can suddenly like actually be really playful and have fun. And I'm liberated from a lot of those judgmental voices and things that might keep me small. So adding this dose of playfulness, which is about seriousness. Again, it's about stripping away some of those layers of like seriousness and rigidity and notions of how we're supposed to come across and how we're supposed to behave in the world, allows us to be more authentic, be more real. So it's a kind of a paradoxical becoming less myself to become more myself.
I think the paradox comes from, and this is me like really drawing from the mindfulness practice I've done and the lens and everything I've learned about that, is what we learn as we go really deep into meditation is that Jay is an avatar too. Right? And that's what resolves the paradox in experience, which is like, because the paradox is if I pretend to be something else, then why would that be more authentic? That's weird. But it's not a paradox when you realize you're pretending to be Jay already. I'm pretending to be Jay
Yeah,
already.
100%. Yeah.
So now I'm pretending to be a different character, and that kind of reveals something about the different natures of identity. And so that's exactly how it feels. Like when I'm launching this book, I'm pretending to be Jay the author, and that's fun. And like when you first realize that, you start to get an antagonistic view. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be JD off. Ugh, I don't want to go on LinkedIn. I always see people, they're like mad about LinkedIn because it's so boring and lame. And I'm like, this is the resume. This is where we all get to pretend to be our career people. And if you don't want to have
Right.
an avatar, like that's fine, but it's fun. And also it's tied to money, so that helps. But these are all different identities you can play with. And I totally agree with you that there's a vulnerability and authenticity that can be achieved when you're just a pseudonym in an early chat room, or when you're wearing a silly hat, or you're in a public place that no one knows you, or you go to an event where you're just a stranger. Even a mundane example is let's say you're in community and you've got your work community, you've got your life community, you've got your community, whatever, but you go somewhere, maybe to an event where you don't know anybody. Let's say you go to a yoga class for the first time. If you actually settle into what that feels like, there's like a nervousness that sometimes comes over your body. There's an energy in your body.
Mm.
And often it's coming from I find in my experience, it's coming from this feeling of possibility. I could be anyone. I don't have to be anyone, and I could be anyone. Both of those things are true right now. None of these people know who I am. They don't even know my name. And I could be like, hey, I'm Roger, and no one would even bat an eye, right? It's just there's no context, and there's something liberating about that. And I think what clowning gets at is the ability to turn that into a practice, something you can skill up if that's what you need. And I think that's why I went to multiple clown workshops with our shared friend Dan, because the first one woke me up to that. I was like, oh, I actually need more playful energy because I'm in a phase of life where I have to be a dad and I have to be a boss and I have to be an author. And there's a lot of things, a lot of roles I have to play. And there was nowhere for the coyote to play. But I went to that workshop and he was rolling around the floor.
Yeah. This is awesome, Jay. I feel like we haven't really scratched the surface of your book, but we've got into some very deep conversation. I always have this slight anxiety before these podcast interviews that will we find the connection between the clown? Because that's the goal between whatever it is and the clowning. But we always do. And I think that's because there is, as you said earlier, something deeply ingrained and entrenched about this clown function in our society. It's always there somewhere. I want to just give you the opportunity before we wrap up. Is there anything else there in the book you'd like people to just be aware of that we haven't talked about? There
I
are
mean,
lots of
no, I
things,
think
but anything specific.
I think we've covered a lot of things. I actually wanted to double down on what you said about the clown element too, because I feel like you have your work cut out for you because the current misconceptions and ideas about what a clown is, like it was really eye-opening for me. But I noticed myself, like when I tell someone about the workshops I went to, I'll throw in words like comedy and improv to be more like, so you know what I mean? Like trying to socialize. I'll be like, hey, I went to this workshop and it combined mindfulness and like comedy and improv and clowning. Like I'll put it at the end there, even though it's like
Playfulness.
at the
It's playfulness.
little hand wavy. Because and the reason I say this is because I know it from the mindfulness. Like even before my time, there were some incredible people who brought mindfulness to the West from an esoteric Eastern religious practice to a hippie thing to now a well accepted form of well-being and grounding, right? And it's been quite a journey for this to become relatively socialized for people. And I feel like on that curve, clown is super early, but like I personally have tasted that depth of it. And I have no doubt you find the connection on the topic because really it's about lightening up. And that is relevant. It is highly relevant in our current society. It's about exploring identity. It's about poking holes in the artifice. It's about stretching the boundaries. These are all highly relevant. There's just something loaded about that term clown, right? And I think it's,
Mm.
I almost said clone. That'd be funny.
Yeah,
We'll pivot to
the clone
cloning
of
in the next
clown.
episode, but yeah.
The funny thing about doing podcasts is that there's this level, there's this awareness that you're being recorded and your voice is going to be heard. So you're already playing a little bit of a role, right? You're
Yeah.
already projecting something of an identity. And then there's
Yeah.
this moment when, in a moment where we're going to finish the interview, which is the bit the people will hear, and we'll say, bye, thanks for being on the podcast. And then I'll stop the record button, but then we'll like keep talking. And then it's the real Jay and Barnaby now.
You know what? Okay, here's my challenge for you. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And
Yeah.
it's a reward for anyone who listened to the whole episode, which is because you said that, what I'm feeling called to do is to ask you to, when this episode starts, start it at the point where my cat threw up and we had to delay.
Oh yeah. That's
Because
nice.
technically we would normally edit that out, but it would be a really funny moment for this podcast to start with me having to be like, I'm gonna be 5 minutes because my cat just threw up. And if anyone listens to the end of this, now they're gonna understand why the podcast started that way.
I
Because
love it.
that
So
was
we
the real you and me. We were just getting to know each other, and I was like, I'm so sorry. My cat literally threw up in the USB port of my desk, so I'll be right back.
And another bit of real life weirdness is that just before we came on, I had this call from my wife, and she was like, Cleo, our daughter just got called from school and she's sick and she has to come home, and can she come to you? And I'm like, I'm about to do this podcast interview, and I'm about to go and do this training. What are we going to do? So in the end, she went and picked Cleo up, and I've now, after this, I've got to go and pick her up and look after
Yeah,
her for the rest of the day. But yeah,
real
cats,
life.
children, all these like beautiful intersections of real life overlapping and interfering, and it's all the beauty of it.
Yeah, this was a joy, Barnaby. It's rare to have an hour-long conversation with someone where we're just, by the end of it, we're stripping identities down and breaking things, and I really appreciate it. I think this is awesome and important work you're doing around getting this way of being more grounded. I think there's a lot of people who could benefit from it. Probably not everyone, but I think there's a lot of people who are trapped in serious identities
Mm.
and have no idea that what they think of is like a birthday clown or Ronald McDonald is actually like a huge potential unlock, like it was for me. So,
Mm.
yeah, keep it up, man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much for your work. And in the spirit of authenticity, maybe we should just say goodbye and actually just hang up and
Yeah,
not
cool. Thank you, man. This was great. I'm glad Dan introduced us.
Before you go, what's the date of the release of the book?
The book is coming out on February 25th.
By the time this comes out, and if you're listening to this, the book should be available. And where can people go as
Yeah,
if
you
they
can
don't know?
search Google my name or go to jayvidyarthi.com or just search
Okay.
Reclaim Your Mind on Amazon or wherever you get books.
Reclaim Your Mind, 7 Strategies to Enjoy Tech Mindfully. Go get it right now. It's really worth a read.
Beauty. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Jay. Have a great
Okay, we're
day.
saying bye for real. We're saying
Yeah.
bye for real.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. See ya. Good to see you.
Bye.
And now you know why we began the episode with Jay's cat throwing up. In the interests of transparency and authenticity and fun and playfulness. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. What a lovely man Jay is, and what a fantastic book. I'm recording this a few weeks after the actual interview, and honestly, I can say that the things I read in that book have shifted my relationship to technology in a really positive way. Some things that have really landed and stuck with me. So I recommend you go out and buy that book, Reclaim Your Mind. I hope that you're planning on attending our wonderful clowning conference, Clownvergence, happening on April 10th to 13th. There's going to be a plethora of workshops, panel discussions, provocations, energizing sessions, even a carnival where you can come and perform or share something. Check it out, clown-spirit.com/clownvirgins. Have a wonderful day. As always, keep clowning!